The warning ignored. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Galactic Council was at peace, their world-dominating fleets patrolling the vastness of space with little opposition. They had wiped out countless species, easily absorbing weaker civilizations into their empire. The might of their forces was unmatched, but now there was a new challenge on the horizon. It started with a small, seemingly insignificant signal, a quiet beep from one of the many remote monitoring stations placed across the galaxy. The technician who noticed it didn't think much of it at first. He thought it was just another interference, a glitch in the system, like so many times before. After all, how could something so small matter in a galaxy as vast as theirs? The signal, however, wasn't random static. It was coming from deep within an unexplored region of space, near the outermost border of known space. For weeks, the signal repeated itself at regular intervals, a simple, cryptic pattern. It was weak, too weak to be anything serious. But it was consistent. Still, no one cared. The Galactic Council had more important matters to deal with. There were political tensions with their nearest neighbors, a few minor rebellions that needed quashing, and routine trade agreements to be signed. They had bigger things to think about than a strange signal from the edge of space. They were confident that nothing could challenge them. No one was as powerful as the Council. They had crushed the mightiest of foes with ease, leaving only dust in their wake. Then, after nearly a month of silence, the signal changed. It grew stronger. The alien race known as the HFY, members of the Galactic Council, were the first to notice. The HFY were renowned for their technological expertise and keen attention to detail. They had their eyes on every corner of the galaxy. When they saw the signal growing in strength, they raised an eyebrow. It was unusual, but certainly not a cause for panic. Still, they'd forwarded it to the higher-ups, to the Council. Inside the Council chambers, the signal was analyzed. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, yet it seemed to be coming from a very specific location. The HFY did their calculations and determined that the source was a human colony, far beyond the Council's controlled borders. Humans, one of the Council members said dismissively, shaking his head. What do they matter? They've barely learned to survive on their own. Their technology is outdated. The others around the table nodded in agreement. The humans were a joke to the Council. They had been living on the fringes of the galaxy, hidden away on their small, insignificant planet, Earth. No one took them seriously. Sure, they had a small, barely functioning fleet of ships, but they were no match for the Council's might. In fact, humans had been on the Council's radar for a long time, but always as a secondary concern. They were just another species that had the misfortune of existing in a galaxy controlled by the more powerful alien races. In fact, humanity had long been considered weak by most of the galaxy's civilizations. They had no special abilities, no immense technological advantage. Just a tiny planet far removed from galactic affairs. One of the Council members, a Gorthian, leaned forward and tapped a few buttons on his console. The screen before him displayed a hologram of the source of the signal, a small human ship, barely able to match the power of the mighty Council ships. "It's just a distress signal," the Gorthian said with a sneer. "Probably a malfunction, or perhaps they're calling for help." Pathetic. A nearby Vezan, a reptilian member of the Council, chuckled. "Help? From whom? I don't see why we should even bother investigating it. Let them figure it out themselves." The leader of the Council, a tall and imposing Vilkian, nodded. "Agreed. Our focus should be on the more important matters. A distress signal from humans. Let them handle their own problems." But not everyone was so sure. A few members of the Council felt that the situation warranted a deeper look. The signal wasn't exactly like the usual distress calls they had encountered. Still, the Council brushed it off, confident that there was no real threat. Days passed, and the signal continued to pulse, growing stronger and more persistent. But the Council didn't take it seriously. Their arrogance and pride in their unmatched power blinded them to the possibility that something dangerous was on the horizon. Then, another piece of information came through. One of their scouts, operating on the fringe of Council space, reported seeing a massive fleet moving toward the Council's territory. It wasn't the usual traffic of neutral ships or small trade fleets. They recognized the ships. They were human warships. The Council froze. No one could believe it. Human warships. They were far too weak to possess anything even remotely threatening. Humans didn't even have the resources to build such a fleet. The very idea was laughable. Their ships were barely equipped for deep space travel, and their weapons technology was nowhere near advanced enough to stand up to the might of the Council. The Council's leaders were dismissive, almost irritated. They were certain that this was just a misunderstanding, that these were nothing more than small human vessels, either lost or desperate. It's a misguided response to some isolated situation, one of the Council members said. They think they're being clever, sending their weak ships our way. We'll deal with them soon enough. But deep down, a quiet worry was beginning to grow. The idea that humans had somehow managed to send this much firepower into space was strange. Yet, no one spoke up about it. They were too confident in their own power to take the warning seriously. However, as the fleet grew closer, strange things started to happen. Alien monitoring stations picked up unusual energy signatures coming from the human fleet. These signatures were far beyond anything humans should have been able to produce. But by then, it was too late. The humans had crossed into Council space. The first of their ships was visible now, and the Council was forced to admit that they had underestimated them. The humans were coming, but they weren't just arriving with small ships like everyone had assumed. They had brought something much, much worse. This marks the beginning of the Council's downfall. Their complete misunderstanding of the humans' true power. What they had brushed aside as an insignificant signal had turned into a storm they were unprepared for. And soon, they would learn that humanity was not the weak species they thought it was. The first human ship entered their space with terrifying purpose, and the Council was about to learn the hardest lesson of their lives. The Galactic Council's fleet was stationed at the outermost edge of their territory, a mere formality rather than a necessity. They had ruled the galaxy for centuries, and no species had ever posed a serious challenge to their power. The idea that a small, unremarkable species like humans could be a threat was laughable. Yet, as the first human warships entered Council-controlled space, the laughter faded. The fleet commander, High Marshal Zytrax of the Vilkian Empire, sat in his command chair, staring at the holographic display. The human ships were unlike anything the Council had seen before. Their energy signatures were strange, unstable yet powerful. Their hulls looked primitive, yet they moved with an unnatural speed. "Are you certain these are human ships?" Zytrax asked, narrowing his reptilian eyes. "Yes, High Marshal," his intelligence officer confirmed. "The markings match their known designations, but their power levels, they don't make sense. These ships should not be able to produce this much energy." Zytrax scoffed. "Humans are known for their desperate tactics. They must be overloading their reactors in a foolish attempt to intimidate us." He turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare to send a warning shot. Let them know where they stand." The officer nodded, inputting the command. A single plasma burst shot from the Council's lead warship, streaking toward the human fleet. It was meant to be a simple warning, a show of power to remind the humans of their place. But something unexpected happened. Just as the plasma shot neared the human fleet, the leading human warship vanished. Gasps echoed throughout the command deck. The plasma blast continued harmlessly into the void, missing its target entirely. Then, without warning, the human ship reappeared, now positioned behind the Council fleet. "Impossible," one of Zytrax's officers shouted. They just disappeared." "They didn't disappear," the intelligence officer muttered, his voice filled with unease. "They moved, faster than we could track." Zytrax's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. "No species moves faster than light in real time. No species. Not even us." Yet the evidence was clear. The human ship had dodged the attack in a way that defied known physics. Then came the next shock. A transmission from the human flagship crackled through the comms. A voice, calm and steady, spoke in perfect galactic standard. "You fired the first shot. That was a mistake." Sitrax sneered. "Open a channel. I will put these creatures in their place." The screen flickered, revealing the image of a human captain. He was older, battle-worn, his eyes sharp and unwavering. His uniform bore no insignia, no flashy decorations, just a simple symbol that the Council had long ignored, a Terran Defense Force emblem. "You are trespassing in Council-controlled space," Sitrax growled. "Surrender your vessels immediately, or you will be destroyed." The human captain tilted his head slightly. "You don't understand the situation, do you?" His voice was disturbingly calm. Sitrax's patience was running thin. "What is there to understand? You are outmatched. You fire." The human captain didn't wait for Sitrax to finish. His command was immediate, and before the Council fleet could react, the human warships opened fire. But these weren't ordinary weapons. The energy beams that erupted from the human ships bent reality itself. The Council's shields, designed to withstand the most advanced weaponry in the galaxy, collapsed instantly upon impact. Council ships that should have been able to endure direct hits from planetary cannons were torn apart in seconds. Panic spread through Sitrax's fleet. They fired back, but the human ships blinked in and out of existence, dodging attacks in ways that were physically impossible. "This isn't right," one of Sitrax's officers screamed. "They are breaking the laws of physics." Sitrax watched in horror as half of his fleet was annihilated in the first minute of battle. No alien species had ever done this to the mighty Galactic Council. No one. The human captain's voice echoed through the comms once more. "You were warned, but you refused to listen." Sitrax realized the horrifying truth. The Galactic Council had ignored the warnings. They had dismissed humanity as weak. And now, they were paying the price. Humanity was not weak. They were something else entirely. Something far worse. Panic gripped the Galactic Council fleet. The human warships moved in ways that defied logic, phasing in and out of sight, dodging attacks that should have been unavoidable. Their weapons, somehow, ignored shields completely, tearing through the Council's mighty battleships like they were made of paper. High Marshal Sitrax had never seen such destruction. In mere minutes, nearly half of his fleet was gone. He slammed his clawed hand onto the command panel. "All ships, defensive formation. Focus fire on the lead human warship." His officers scrambled to obey, their hands shaking as they locked onto the largest of the human ships, the one that had spoken. It was a dark, imposing vessel, its surface shifting as if reality itself was uncertain about its existence. A massive barrage of plasma bolts and high-yield torpedoes streaked toward the human flagship. For a moment, Sitrax thought they had done it. The weapons struck true, engulfing the human ship in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled outward, causing smaller vessels to shake under the force. Silence filled the Council's command deck. Had they destroyed it? The smoke and fire slowly cleared, revealing nothing. The human flagship was gone. Sitrax's breath caught in his throat. His officers stared in silent terror at the empty space where the ship had been. Then the alarms blared. "High Marshal," one of his officers screamed. It's behind us." Sitrax spun around just in time to see the massive human warship materialize right in the center of his fleet. "Your weapons are useless." The human captain's voice echoed through the comms, calm and emotionless. Sitrax had fought in 100 wars. He had seen civilizations burn. But never, not once, had he felt this level of fear. Still, he was a warrior. He would not go down without a fight. "All ships, Co and VRG. Ram them, if you must," he roared. The remaining Council ships surged forward, desperate to crush the lone human vessel through sheer numbers. But before they could reach it, The flagship unleashed a pulse wave unlike anything ever recorded in galactic history. It was not an explosion. It was not a weapon. It was a tear in reality itself. The space around the human flagship twisted, bending and folding in unnatural ways. Council ships caught in the blast vanished instantly, erased from existence as if they had never been there. Sytrax watched in horror as more than a dozen of his remaining warships simply ceased to be. It was not destruction. It was erasure. The human captain spoke again, his voice cold and final. This battle was over before it even began. Sytrax could feel it. This was not war. This was punishment. The remaining fleet was in disarray. Marshal Sytrax had never seen his forces retreat in such disorganized chaos. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the Galactic Council's elite fleet had always held its ground. But this was something different, something terrifying. Sytrax watched helplessly as his ships scattered in every direction, trying to evade the relentless human warships that seemed to anticipate every move. The humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were showing them the depths of their power. It was as if the laws of physics themselves bent under the weight of their might. Marshal, one of Sytrax's commanders, trembling, spoke over the comms. "We can't stop them. Their weapons, every shot breaks through our shields. Our fleets are being destroyed, one by one. We need to retreat." But retreat was not an option. Sytrax clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his position. His entire fleet, his entire command, was slipping away. The humiliating reality settled in. The mighty Galactic Council was losing to a single human fleet. The Council's reputation had been built on the idea that no one could challenge them. They had taken on countless species, crushed rebellions, and established their dominance across thousands of systems. But now, a species they had once dismissed as primitive was tearing through them like paper. A message flashed on the command screen, an SOS, from one of the few remaining ships in the fleet. Desperation flooded the signal. "We need backup. We can't hold on much longer. Request immediate extraction." The Marshal's hands trembled as he reached to reply, but he already knew what had to be done. There was no backup coming. No rescue was on the horizon. The human ships would ensure that. "Do you understand now?" The human captain's voice crackled over the comms, cutting through the panic like a blade. "We told you your shields would never work against us. We told you to leave us alone." Sytrax's mind raced. They had underestimated the humans. They had thought their technology, their advanced fleet, could wipe out this small, seemingly insignificant species. They were wrong. As if on cue, a blinding pulse of light flared from the human flagship. A ripple spread outward, swallowing several more ships whole. No explosions, no debris, just nothingness. Sytrax could see the fear in his remaining officers' eyes. They were witnessing the impossible, and there was nothing they could do. "Retreat, Marshal," one of his officers screamed. "We have to save what's left." But the order never came. Sytrax couldn't speak. He couldn't form a plan. The gravity of the situation weighed too heavily on him. The Council's strength, their entire way of life, was crumbling in real time. A new wave of panic spread through the fleet as another set of human ships entered the battlefield. Smaller than the flagship, but just as deadly, they began to systematically disable the remaining ships with terrifying precision. Sytrax had once heard legends of Deathworlders, beings from planets so hostile that only the strongest could survive. But this was something far worse. The humans didn't just fight to win. They fought with a purpose. Every strike, every maneuver was calculated. They weren't in it for glory. They weren't in it for conquest. They were there to erase an entire civilization. And Sytrax, the mighty Marshal of the Galactic Council, was powerless to stop it. "What have we done?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. The gravity of his realization hit him like a hammer. The Council had sealed its fate when it first underestimated humanity. Now there was no turning back. The human ships closed in, their weapons charging for one final devastating strike. And then, as if to underscore their victory, a message flashed across the screens of Tytrax's command deck, cold and final. "We warned you. And now, it ends." The remaining ships of the Council, broken and desperate, could do nothing but wait for the inevitable. The humans had already won. Tytrax watched in silent horror as the once mighty Galactic Council fleet crumbled before his eyes. The human ships, dark and relentless, moved like predators, each strike cutting through shields as if they didn't exist. It wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a systematic annihilation. "Marshal, we can't hold much longer." A desperate voice crackled over the comms. "They're targeting our engines. They want to keep us from escaping." Tytrax's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. He knew the humans had already won, but something inside him refused to surrender. "This is not how the Council falls," he growled, forcing strength into his voice. "We make our last stand here." His remaining officers exchanged glances. They knew what this meant. No escape. No reinforcements. No mercy. But surrender was not an option. "All remaining ships, form a tight defensive line around my flagship," Tytrax ordered. "If they want to destroy us, they will have to fight for every last one of us." His fleet responded, the remaining warships pulling into a desperate formation. The strategy was clear: delay the inevitable. But deep down, Tytrax knew the truth. It wouldn't be enough. The human fleet adjusted, adapting in real time. Their movements were perfect, precise, as if they already knew the Council's next steps. It was terrifying. It was inhuman. A sudden impact rocked Tytrax's ship. Sparks exploded from the control panels. The bridge crew staggered. "Direct hit," an officer shouted. "Our forward cannons are offline." Tytrax snarled. He slammed a fist against the armrest. "Then we fight with what we have left." The Council's ships fired everything: lasers, torpedoes, disruptors. But it was like fighting a storm with pebbles. The human ships barely flinched. And then, the flagship arrived. It was massive, black as the void, with a presence that felt ancient and unstoppable. The moment it entered the battlefield, everything changed. The weight of its presence crushed all hope. A communication request flashed on Tytrax's screen. He hesitated. Why would the humans talk now? They could finish this in seconds. Was this their way of mocking him? With a deep breath, he accepted the transmission. The screen flickered, revealing a single human figure. A captain. Calm, unshaken, deadly. "You should have listened," the human said. His voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed. Tytrax bared his fangs. "You act like we had a choice. The Council does not bow to threats." The human sighed. "No, you don't bow. You break." Before Tytrax could respond, the transmission cut off. And then the human flagship fired. A beam of energy tore through space, cutting across the battlefield like a scythe. Ships vanished instantly, reduced to nothingness. No wreckage, no debris, just gone. Tytrax's heart pounded. He had seen planetary sieges. He had witnessed the fall of empires. But this was the end of the Galactic Council. And humanity had made sure of it. Tytrax's flagship trembled under the force of the human attack. The once mighty Galactic Council fleet was now reduced to scattered, burning wrecks drifting in space. The battle was no longer a fight. It was a massacre. Warnings blared across the bridge as fire erupted from damaged control panels. Officers scrambled to maintain control, but it was useless. "Marshal, our shields are failing," a panicked officer shouted. "We won't survive another hit." Tytrax gritted his teeth. His entire life had been spent securing the Council's dominance over the galaxy. They had ruled with absolute authority, believing no species could ever challenge them. But the humans were something else entirely. A new alert flashed across the bridge. Another human battleship was approaching. No, several of them. More reinforcements, as if they weren't already unstoppable. Sitrax slumped in his command chair. There was no winning this war. The screen flickered again. Another transmission request from the human captain. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The humans weren't here to bargain. Sitrax clenched his claws and accepted the call. The same human from before appeared on screen. His expression was unreadable, his presence as cold as the void itself. "Your fleet is finished," the human said. "Surrender now." Sitrax felt his pride screaming at him to refuse, to fight until the last ship burned. But what was the point? It was already over. And then the human spoke again. "Surrender, or be erased." A cold dread crept into Sitrax's bones. He had heard rumors about how humanity fought, how they didn't just destroy their enemies. They made sure they were never a threat again. Entire civilizations had vanished after underestimating humans. This wasn't just a war. It was extermination. Sitrax inhaled sharply, his pride warring with his survival instincts. He turned to his crew, watching them scramble desperately to keep the ship from breaking apart. If he refused, they would all die. The bridge was silent. Everyone was waiting. Sitrax closed his eyes. This was the end of the Council's rule. But at least, some of them could live. He exhaled shakily and looked back at the screen. "We surrender." The human didn't smile. He didn't look victorious. He simply nodded. "Good," he said. "Now listen carefully, because we decide what happens next." The moment the words left Sitrax's mouth, the reality of the situation settled in. Surrender. It wasn't a victory. It was survival. His once proud fleet, shattered and broken, floated in the void, and his people, the mighty Galactic Council, would now be subjugated to the whims of humanity. The galaxy that once feared them was now at their mercy. The transmission went silent, and Sitrax's mind raced. He had hoped that the surrender would somehow spare them from the worst, but now he realized that hope was nothing more than a fleeting illusion. What would the humans do with them? Would they destroy the Council completely? Or worse, would they make them live under their rule forever, humiliated and powerless? The human captain's voice cut through the silence. "You made the right choice," he said calmly, his tone as chilling as ever. "But this is only the beginning. You wanted to dominate the galaxy. Now you'll learn what it means to serve it." Sitrax's heart sank. His people had always been the ones giving the orders, never the ones obeying them. To become servants was unthinkable. He was a marshal, a leader of untold power, yet here he was, bowing to the inevitable. "We'll begin the occupation immediately," the human continued. "You'll be stationed on a world of your choice. No weapons, no armies, no fleets. You'll work to rebuild what you destroyed, and you'll answer to us." Sitrax felt the weight of the human's words pressing down on him. He wanted to scream, to resist, but he knew it would be futile. The humans had defeated them with ease. No fleet, no military, no strategy could have prepared them for the savage efficiency of a species that had never been known to lose. They had underestimated humanity. The human's face remained stoic as he issued the final command. "Send your remaining ships to the nearest human-controlled sector. They will be recommissioned as part of our fleet. Any resistance will be crushed immediately." Sitrax nodded grimly. The thought of their ships being repurposed for human use felt like a sword to his heart. The very vessels that had once struck fear into the galaxy were now nothing more than tools for their enemies. "Understood," Sitrax replied hoarsely. His voice betrayed his helplessness. "We will comply." The transmission ended, and the crew of the flagship stared at the screens in silence. Their fate was sealed, and with it, the fate of the Galactic Council. In the distance, the horizon shimmered as human ships approached, their sleek forms gliding through space with terrifying precision. They were here, and there was nothing left to fight. Sitrax stared out at the stars, his mind clouded with the weight of what had just transpired. The galaxy he had once ruled, the empire he had spent his life building, was now nothing more than a memory. And humanity had proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it wasn't just a force to be reckoned with. They were a force of nature. As his ship slowly turned toward the nearest human-controlled world, Hytrax couldn't help but wonder if the galaxy had misjudged humanity all along. They hadn't just conquered. They hadn't just destroyed. They had remade the rules. And now, there was no escape.